Michael, welcome. Great to chat to you.
Great to see you, Catherine.
Well, you're just starting to emerge from yet another lockdown, and New South Wales and the ACT are getting the wobbles, so the COVID story continues to dominate. Just quickly, what's your assessment? There's starting to be a little bit of disillusionment, it seems, about the rollout of the vaccine. Do you think the government's losing any paint over this?
Look, it's probably losing some, but inevitably this was going to happen when you've got 200 other countries competing for the same number of doses and or access to the antidote. And we're a country with almost no infections. So obviously there were countries ahead of us in the queue, and the EU made that clear. But
Sure.
Domestically here within the states, I mean, certainly in Victoria, we're finding lockdown exhaustion here. The Victorian community are now totally exhausted. I do not think there will be another lockdown in Victoria, no matter what happens. The Victorian government has exhausted this economy in this state. So I don't think politically they can afford another one. And thank goodness for that.
Yeah, look, staggering contrast. I watched all of Gladys Berejiklian's announcement today, and just the moderation in response and the graduated response rather than hitting the brake. It really was an extraordinary study in contrasts, and I hope the federal coalition make a little more of that as a genuine branding approach. It seems to me that the Liberal model is working better than the instinctive authoritarian model in the South. But we'll see Mr North Face back on deck Monday week, I gather. What's your feeling about it?
We will.
Do you think he'll seek another term, Michael? I'm wondering whether he might not fold his hand.
I do think he'll seek another term. He's still relatively young. He's in front in the polls. And the question always is, what would he do? What would he do if he leaves? If he leaves Parliament, what's he going to do? I mean, you'll see. We know for many politicians, there's really no serious life after politics, and he can be premier or consultant in a logistics company somewhere. So I do think he'll stay for another term. I do.
Yeah, although you can always reinvent yourself as a critic of Sky and Murdoch and run a big Twitter account and be a miserable ghost at the party. But
but how's that working for Malcolm and Kevin? Not so good.
Not
mate.
Great, is it, Michael?
Not
look,
so good.
The domestic and the international, of course, morphed with the PM on the world stage at an in-person summit. What was your take out on that? It never, in my view, harms an Australian leader, especially one who's had so many aspersions cast on his moral and intellectual seriousness. I would have thought that was a pretty good week for the PM, being seen on the global stage and some pretty strong messaging.
Yeah, I think so. It's always difficult when you're not in the front row. You're sort of second row at the fashion parade. Sort of a B-lister. So you're not part of the main game, and therefore you're subject to ridicule. But I thought Morrison did exceptionally well. I mean, he got the group, basically G7, to take a strong stand against China.
Yes.
Which hadn't really been on the cards to any great degree. He got the French to take a strong stand against China, which hadn't been on the cards. He certainly got the French to take, he raised the issue of the subs at the highest level with President Macron. He wasn't pressured by another endless conference show over, global warming, how we can, increase our targets this conference. So that wasn't debated with him, thank goodness. So he got the free trade agreement through with Britain. I think it was a very good event for Morrison. I must say most Australian leaders do well on the world stage, but I think he in particular on this occasion got some substantial things out of it. And I suppose one of the biggest points to come out of the whole arrangement was the whole meetings were the continued frosty relations between the Americans and the Russians, but it's ever been thus. But I don't think we're going to see any thawing of relations there. So, I thought Morrison did very well. He did very well.
Indeed, and I think getting that consensus from, as you said, a couple of unexpected quarters puts some of his domestic critics back in their box too, in that this nonsense about it being an Australian-created problem over the breakout of the virus and so forth. I think it gives some context to see there are credible leaders, not centre-right leaders also, it might be added, who are pushing back on China. But look, just on the politics of energy, Michael, it's been interesting that it was almost a preemptive strike from some in the National Party this week, even though nothing came out of the G7 that was of any great note on energy policy. The Nationals seem a bit restless. Is that a comment on the weakness of the leadership of Michael McCormack, or is there a genuine fear, do you think, that the PM will give ground on the 2050 target?
I think it's all of the above. I think he will give ground ultimately, as the international community moves to a consensus on this issue. I think it's being used by some people in the National Party to undermine McCormack. And I think it does arise out of genuine concerns by National Party members and backbenchers and some of the Liberal Party that this is all very well, but could someone actually show us an actual physical roadmap as to how we're going to get there? I mean, you know what you saw Biden recently saying, look, half the technologies that we need to invent to get to zero by 2050 haven't been invented yet. So you know, I think quite rightly, when you're representing landowners, agricultural holders, you know, miners and farmers, as both Conservative parties do, who are going to be hit by the emissions reductions, you know, the productive sector wants to know, not just some blue pie in the sky, blue sky promise from a politician who won't be in office by 2030, let alone 2050. How is this going to happen? How are we going to get there? What's the effect on industry? What's the effect on our country? What's the effect on prices for energy? I mean, no leader in the world has been able to put down a roadmap to tell their country how we're getting there and what the domestic economic consequences are. And that's why so many people, me included, look at this thing and say, oh, well, that's great in principle, but, you know, Kevin Rudd had a promise to end homelessness by, 2020? Well, you know, it increased. I mean, you can have all these grandiose schemes, but I think the public these days say, that's fine, tell me how specifically we're going to get there and how it affects me. Yeah,
I think I think there's still more peril in the politics of energy and coal mining for the Labor Party, frankly, but we've said that before as well. Look, Michael.
Correct.
You've been critical of the ABC. I'm no great fan of the leadership there. Two things out of this week. The QAnon story, if that wasn't the greatest beat up in history, and if that does not discredit Four Corners almost irrevocably, I don't know what will. How can Scott Morrison be apparently in thrall to Hillsong and QAnon simultaneously? Like, where does this end? You know, how many of them will have to move to Parramatta to get some sense into this joint? You know, like, really interested in your thoughts on that. I couldn't believe Nicky Savva wrote a column saying that he had a case to answer on that, frankly.
No, that look, Nicky's. Yeah, I've said enough about Nicky. That was very poor, a very poor column. And anyway, we've come to expect that type of thing, unfortunately, from Nicky from time to time. I mean, at least it wasn't a column about Abbott and Credlin again. At least we can be thankful for that. Look, I take the view, and I disagree with the editorial of The Australian. I thought they had a relatively insipid response to this announcement. This was a shallow, vacuous, meaningless announcement of moving 300 people from point A to point B. They've moved their office 20k. Well, does that change the culture? So what does that mean? Does it mean, so they walk past some people in Parramatta into the office, they meet them in a kebab shop at lunchtime, and they walk past them on the way out of the office towards the train station. How does that make any significant difference to the ABC? Zero. And as you've seen from the myriad of letters, particularly in the Australian today, people basically saying this is nonsense, and it is nonsense. What does it do about bias? What does it do about getting some conservative voices in the ABC? What does it do about the week in, week out appalling, you know, left bias of shows like Q&A, of The Drum? What does it do about any of these issues? Nothing. What does it do about changing the stories that the ABC shows so it can concentrate more on the mining industry and the rural industries? You know, what does it do to say, you know, get the ABC telling Australian stories about what the mining industry means to this country? I mean, we've got a trade surplus, the economy's booming. I mean, you know, one of the main reasons is because of the surging, you know, exports, and that's the mining industry and the agricultural industry. Where are the Australian stories about this? No, it's about Australia Day. It's about global warming. It's about the traditional ABC fanfare. And so do I think moving 300 people, 20k is going to make a difference to any of those things? No, it's a nonsense. And for a business organisation to sit there and listen to this as some great, you know, revelation by the ABC it's just a nonsense, Catherine. It's a nonsense. They should come up with something substantial, and people should stop falling for this nonsense.
Indeed, and I saw the controversy over the maintenance of the Australian National Archives, that I'm pretty much in the middle of the consensus at the Australian Letters column that they should rip the money out of the ABC budget to repair that. Michael, just want to close on one point to see whether you had an inspired insight on this, but I saw you with Paul Murray the other night. You've got a sense Peter Dutton might do something about the Afghan interpreters who supported our forces. Was that a gut feel, or do you know something you want to tell me? No one's watching.
No. Well, it's a gut feel. I mean, you just look at Dutton's history. He's been incredibly consistent as a politician, and you pay those politicians, whether you like them or not, you pay those who are consistent. Dutton's been very consistent all the way through his career. Yeah. Do I think Peter Dutton sounds like a person that's going to say to the Afghan interpreters who have risked their lives in this cause, sorry, we're going to leave you there, like the Brits left the Iraqi interpreters there after the first Gulf War? Do I think Dutton's going to do that? No, I don't think he's going to do that. It would be very non-Dutton to do that. It doesn't sound like Dutton to do that. So do I know anything? No, but I know Peter Dutton, and I would be shocked and profoundly disappointed if the government didn't bring them here. If anyone deserves to come to this country, they do.